Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Erika Heald. So this must be Content Chat. And actually, it's a really special content chat for two reasons. First of all, it's our final content chat of the year because realistically, the next few weeks are going to be a flurry of people getting ready for the end of the year and the holidays and not paying a lot of attention to things, even though they're as fun and interesting as our weekly conversations. But it's also really exciting for me because I have my friend Michelle Garrett here, who just wrote her first book. And I'm so excited to have her on here to talk to me about it, especially because, and we'll talk about this later, she and I have done a lot of collaboration in the past with a shared client, with me coming at things from the content marketing standpoint and Michelle from the PR standpoint. So I think this is going to be a really fun conversation today about, where that owned content and the earned content, where those things really can lead to rich collaboration. But before we dive in, Michelle, tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so fun to be here and have a chance to talk.
And isn't it great that we're on video finally? Because before it was us typing at each other really fast on Twitter.
I was thinking about that. That was one of the first chats I ever went to on Twitter. So, and it set, the bar and the example. And, so I'm glad that you've transitioned it. So it still exists, but it's really nice to see you and it's good to be here. So, gosh, about me. Well, I have been consulting, doing PR and writing for, 20 plus years on my own. Before that, I was in Silicon Valley, working for tech companies like HP and Adobe. And I worked at Cunningham Communication, which was Andy Cunningham's agency. She worked with Steve Jobs. And so I did that before I went out on my own. And then I just kind of have never looked back. So I'm back in my native Ohio now, but I'm still a consultant and working with B2B clients and really focusing on manufacturing, technology clients, and those kind of sectors.
Fantastic. Well, you and I both, I definitely have that love and knack for B2B, which is, it's not everybody's cup of tea. But it's funny how, I trained as a journalist, as I know you did too. And my goal was to be a magazine journalist. That's what I, specialized in. And then, of course, I went into a job market where, that was kind of the start of the decline of journalism being a career versus a hobby. Where, because you can only do so much from a living standpoint on 8 cents per word on a freelance basis, it's shocking because I recently saw today some freelance job postings that, again, were 8 cents per word. I'm like, how on earth is it that we're still paying writers so horribly? So that said, it's so interesting how the B2B PR world really does play on all of those skill sets that you learned in journalism school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it does. And what I love about B2B is I always feel like they have so much to talk about. And I'm not saying that, consumer companies do not, but I felt like sometimes when I would work with a consumer client, it was product related. So they'd have a product once every, I don't know, 6 months. And then it would be like, okay, now, we'd have to really figure out what to talk about the rest of the time. A lot of the clients I work with now in B2B are, they've been around a while. Some are 50 years old, so they have real thought leaders, people who have been in the industry for a while and have, know the lay of the land and have things to share. They have really cool customer stories. They have behind the scenes material where you can show and talk about what they're doing with their solutions and equipment and so forth. So I really think it's fun to dig into all that. And often they don't like to toot their own horn, especially if you're in the Midwest. So they kind of need that and really appreciate that when you can get them out there in the spotlight and increase their visibility and so forth. So
I know for me, it definitely feels like when you do B2B content creation, communications or media relations or PR, all those things, you are really, primarily helping somebody, tell their story and connect with people, which is what you would do if you're a good writer. If you're interviewing somebody, you're telling their story to help them connect with people. So it is really interesting how there are so many similarities in that kind of continuing thread. But that
Yeah.
said, I don't know about you, but when I was in-house, a lot of times there would be tension over like ownership and things between the content creators, the PR and comms team, employee comms. But the thing is at the end of the day, owned and earned media, they have so many synergies. So I thought that'd be a really good place for us to start, because I love that your book does a great job of going into helping people understand that PR is not just media relations, which feels like it's something that we've been saying for decades, but there's still people who think that that's all PR is. It's getting somebody into the Wall Street Journal, regardless of if their clients are there or not. But in fact,
Right.
there's so much more. So let's start there.
Yeah, wow. That's so funny because we have been talking about it forever, and we probably will be talking about it forever, on forever after now. I don't know. Anyway, it's just, it never seems to go away, regardless of how, we try to educate clients. And it's really important for me to work with clients who understand what is and isn't possible and have expectations that are really in line with what PR can help them do, which is a lot, but, it's not an overnight solution. Again, to your point, getting in the Wall Street Journal is not going to solve all your problems. And it's not always, as easy as like snapping your fingers and achieving that. So it's not wrong to have that as a goal. But I think getting there, you really have to figure out, maybe how to ladder up a little bit. If no one's ever heard of your company, you've got to start somewhere. And usually that would be with, I like trade media for
Mhm.
B2Bs, and even sometimes the local business journal or something like that, kind of ease into it. And all that comes up in search. So, reporter at a, top tier publication might be searching for story ideas, and it might come up in their search, for example. So it does help your visibility in a number of ways. And now I've been talking with people a lot about AI based search. You want to be everywhere. And
Yep.
PR is the way, one way, and content, of course, to help you get there, right? I mean, so that it's definitely, I don't want clients and companies to look down on any opportunities they have to be featured in the media, on a podcast, in a blog, on a webinar, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be the Wall Street Journal to really have meaning and help your company achieve those goals.
I completely agree. And it makes me sad when I see all the folks involved with creating content not kind of collaborating, because that getting earned media coverage for things that you've produced on the content side of things, that's so powerful. And then it gives you, so much more credibility, a larger audience. So maybe you could share a little bit for people who are not as familiar with it,
Mhm.
the ways in which when you have that robust owned content that you
Mhm.
have out there, what
Yep.
earned media can do to, give it some extra oomph.
What I really like to do with clients, sometimes I'm actually writing some of the own content, but sometimes we're taking content that they've already written or that someone else has written for them, and we are using it to plug it into our earned media efforts. So we are pitching a customer story that they published on their site, for example, to a trade publication. They love those, especially if they have strong visuals, if they have high resolution images and maybe video or something like that. You don't have to have that, but it does
Yeah.
help. And what else? So I'd say we do a lot with thought leadership, as in interviewing, the thought leaders. Sometimes that's the CEO, for example, once a quarter, sitting down, kind of ghostwriting a piece. We publish that on their site, but then that can also be pitched again to a trade publication, for example, who they're, eager to publish pieces that are actually, contain real thought leadership. And I'm not talking about cookie cutter, sound the same as everyone else, AI generated. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that have real, insight to share. And that's another example of something we would do.
And in the book, you cited a number of comments from Michelle Len from Mantis Research.
Yes, yes.
And
Yep,
I love Michelle. She's my go-to expert for
yep.
any kind of proprietary research. And
Mhm.
she, of course, a lot of you will know her work from the Content Marketing Institute and their annual slate of surveys and research reports that really
Mhm.
dig into how people are using content marketing.
Yep.
And of course, that's one of those real biggies that frequently neither PR nor the content team have enough budget on their own
Yep.
necessarily to work with an outside party on creating
Mhm.
those kinds of things. But together, that to me is one of those great things that gives you really great search visibility, but then also gives you something fantastic to pitch to the media.
It's great, and that I'm glad you brought that up because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know there's a couple other things that I could cite here, and that's one of them because, yes, Michelle and I have talked, and I'm a big fan of hers, and we've known each other through the Content Marketing Institute, content marketing world for a while, and she just has some really great ideas about if you don't have the budget for research, you can do it yourself, but you definitely don't want to just like jump in and without any thought or planning, or it's really good to follow her for those tips if you do want to do it yourself, or if you want to hire somebody, she'd be a great person to hire too. And then once you have the research, there's so many ways you can use it in PR, in your own content. I mean, you could really slice and dice it a number of ways, pull out the key insights, pitch those as a story. Reporters love that, especially if they can look under the hood and see that you did a really thorough job in your research, in your survey, or however you conducted the research. I think a lot of times companies will say, well, we did this research, and maybe they talked to 5 people. That's not really, that doesn't really cut it. So we have to make sure we're doing it the right way in order to get out of it everything that we can, I think.
Have you had, I mean, do you have a sense for what constitutes a decent sample size now? Because I feel like it changes all the time.
Mhm.
And earlier in my career, you needed to have a really large sample size before you could get media placement. But it does
Yeah.
feel like if it's a niche audience,
Mhm.
um, or in it has some really interesting findings that you don't necessarily have to have, 1,000 respondents to actually get people to be talking about your research.
I mean, I don't know for sure, but my sense is that a few hundred, 2 or 300 even might do it. I do think it depends again, like what is it you're trying to figure out, and how big is the market or the niche? Because you might even interview 100 people if it were a particular very focused area, and maybe that would bring some insight that would be valuable. Now, I don't know if reporters would buy that, but now we know, of course, we can use it even if a reporter wasn't going to write a story about it. You could use it on social, you could
Yeah.
publish it on your site, use it on LinkedIn, etc., and so on. So,
And I know one of the clients that I worked with this past year, they do a huge global C-suite survey. And in some of the, when they do this slicing and dicing, some of these segments don't necessarily have more than 100 folks in them, be it a regional segment or an industry segment.
mhm,
But because of the caliber of the people, the
yeah.
level of those folks, and the kinds of questions they're asking, they still get a lot of pickup. I've been finding, whereas before you used to have, at least 500 for anybody to even look at it to see if it was interesting. So it is nice to see
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Now, one of the kind of, I don't want to say biggest debates, but maybe one of the areas of spirited disagreement amongst clients, be they internal or external clients, and people
Mhm.
who actually do what you and I do for a living, is, what is or is not actually newsworthy? And
Mhm.
frankly, how that varies. So let's
Mhm.
start with trade media, because, to the point we were just talking about, they're all about what's new and exciting and interesting in your industry. So they're going to be talking about stuff that's a lot more niche, a lot more deep, a lot more granular, and a lot earlier than other places. So, what makes a good piece of content to be pitching to the trade journals?
Well, I mean, with my clients, I find that we do a lot with the customer stories when we can. Sometimes, if the customer won't be part of the effort. They, for legal reasons, they won't, you can't say who the customer is. That's a little bit limiting. So if you're in that situation, I'd say that's a little tougher of a hill to climb. Also, a lot of trade publications that I work with on the manufacturing side like visuals that were taken at the customer's facility. So that's another thing. I tell
Yep.
the clients when they're going in there now, you want to get as much as you can while you're there. So make sure you bring your photographer, your videographer,
Get
whatever.
that B-roll.
Yeah, just capture it all, because you don't want to be pestering them, over and over again. And then also sometimes the trade pub will want to interview the customer on their own, even though you've done that and you've sent them the story with the facts that they would need. Sometimes they still want to talk to them just to verify and get their own quotes. And so it's good to know if that customer is able to do that and agreeable, has time, and so forth. And also you want to make sure that it's a really enthusiastic customer, because you don't want to, sometimes, you'll have a good relationship with a customer, and then, you go to pitch it and the sales department will say, well, we got a little snafu right now. We got to address this before, you pitch. So you just want to make sure that you kind of stay in touch. Obviously PR and marketing are going to be in touch, I would hope, but also with sales, because that's a big part of your customer pipeline, your customer story pipeline, I think. So that's an example. We also do the thought leadership. We pitch the thought leadership to trade publications. They often like that. Now, I wouldn't say you could pitch that every month, but aside, you're going to pitch your product news, of course, to trades. But when you're trying to fill in the gaps, customer stories, thought leadership, if you have a trend piece, perhaps, that you could pitch, and research, if you have that. Not everybody has that. So those are some things that I would say I would pitch to trades.
Well, you said kind of a bad word. You said trend piece. Because the reason I say it's a bad word is because it's December 9th right now. And I don't know about you, but I would say there's a 50-50 chance, if you do any kind of work like this, that in the next 2 weeks, you're going
Yeah.
to have somebody say to you, gosh, should we do an end of the year trend and forecasting for next year piece? And you're going to say, sure, we should do that next October.
Yes. Yes, I try to get them started. We did it in October. We started in October and got it out there before the election day, because I knew that it was just going to be like really hard to get people's attention. And,
Totally.
even if you could get a journalist, an editor to publish it, the audience is so all over the map that it's really hard to get anyone to pay attention and read it. But you're right. There will be people that will be trying to chunk that out. And
And
I
they'll
usually
even get it
say,
published. You can even get it published, but then they're publishing it in the week between Christmas and New Year's.
right, right. Well, and I'm not going to say every, but some agencies they would just care
Yeah.
that it got published at all. So, I mean, I always try to optimize if we're doing it, like we really want to get the most we can out of it. So I
Yeah, if
do
you're gonna shoot
start
your shot,
really
you want it to
early.
be a good one.
Yeah, yeah, and you wanna get it out there before everybody else, because I think the other thing that happens is everybody looks at what everybody else is saying, and then they pull from that as far as, what goes in their piece, which,
Yep.
I mean, it's not, I guess it's not the end of the world, but, like, if you're a real thought leader, you want to have, be first at the, have the first crack at it, I
Yep.
think. I mean, that's what I would say, but
100%. So, okay, so trade press, that all I think, makes sense in that you can be pretty niche. It can be, individual thought leadership trends. There's kind of a wide range of things. But
yeah,
then when you want to take it up a level and start pitching any kind of business press, even if you're talking local business journals, then
right.
the stakes get a little bit higher, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I work with both publicly traded and private clients, and of course, the publicly traded ones will be asked to share their financials.
Yep.
Private companies can decline to do that. So I don't know if everybody knows that, but it is true. And of course, startups often, don't know what to say if they're asked about that. And if
Yeah.
you're not public, you don't have to disclose it. So, but that would be one thing. If I was publicly traded and I was going into business press, I'd make sure I was ready to talk about my numbers, of course. And then just, I guess there's a level of, I don't know. I feel like we've seen a lot of CEOs and C-suite thought leaders, spokespeople kind of going off the rails as far as just, they don't really, they're not preparing, or maybe they're not out in the world and don't know that what they're saying doesn't make sense. I still remember the Kellogg's, I don't know if he was the CEO or what level he was, but he talked about people eating cereal for dinner, people if they were on a budget and trying to squeeze their pennies,
I was like,
like,
"That's sad, let's not talk about that. That is not the image you wanna put in everyone's mind. Yes, we've all eaten cereal for dinner, but that's not,
right.
like, what we strive for."
No, it should be a choice. It shouldn't be, wow, this is all we have. And by the way, cereal is not cheap anymore. I saw
No,
somebody
it's
say it was
not.
like $8 a box. I'm like, wow. So, but yeah, that's just an example that pops into my head. And then I think, last year too, there was a Wendy's exec that was talking about like pricing, like fluctuating the price based on time of day or the market they were in, or, and we saw that with Kroger's, I think too. So anyway, I'm not saying it's wrong for companies to maybe have these conversations behind closed doors, but you've got to be careful about what you're saying publicly, and you've got to be preparing. And if you're not prepared, you should be talking to your PR or comms person, or getting some media training, or, just taking some steps to kind of understand how you're going to sound when you start talking in front of the press or the audience or whoever it is. So,
And, timing is a big issue, to your point of what we're just talking about. And, over the past few days, we've seen, unnamed healthcare companies try to just casually put
hmm,
out there some unpopular changes, thinking because of the other healthcare news being so sensational and front page that they could just squeak it past. And instead, it blew up and they had to walk back their unfavorable changes that they were going to make. So it's like, if you're going to go talk to the business press when there's a news cycle going on that involves your industry, be careful about what you're doing. Be sure that you're not trying to either ride those coattails or to bury something, because that's usually not going to happen. It's not going to turn out good for you.
no, I mean, read the room, and that's the other thing. And I think that if you're in touch, you stay closely in step with your PR and comms team, or your counselor, or whoever it is that you lean on in that department for advice, or your consultant or your agency or whoever it is. I just feel like they're going to help you have the listening, the ears, tuned into what's going on, because honestly, people get busy. They might scan the headlines, but not everybody's like engrossed in the news. And I think PR people often are really, for better or worse, we have our ear to the ground pretty much most of the time and know what's going on. So, or we can do a search, and of course there are tools you can use, but just make sure that you understand, and things can change really fast too. So you just, like maybe you had remarks prepared last week and this week it's a different story, so you just have to be really, um, we live in a news cycle that's just always on now. So you have to be ready for that.
And I mean, I think, that's just so so true. You just have to be ready. And back in the day, Help a Reporter Out was such a good indicator of that, because primarily the trade press and the business press would really lean on that when they had a quick turnaround and needed to find someone who was in a niche industry that they didn't necessarily have, or a very specific use case as an example for a story. They would
Mm-hmm.
use that. And of course, Haro got purchased by Cision and now it's being shut down.
Right.
So how are people trying to tap in? Like, how are they finding some of those opportunities with those journalists that they might not know, because of how much turnover there is, both with the publications and with their employees?
Well, Peter Schenkman, who started Haro, has now started a service called Source of Sources, and it is really, I won't say a Haro replacement, but it definitely, follows in the footsteps of Haro, and it's free. He says he's never going to charge for it. And he didn't before, the company was
Mhm.
acquired. It was free. And I think even then there was still a level of free, but you could pay more and like have more access or faster. I don't know, with something like that. But I mean, I just think it's a really great platform. I do think it's easy to misuse it because we see link builders who kind of take advantage or don't really use it the same way that maybe a PR person would use it. And I also don't think that you should ever rely only on reactive opportunities. You should be proactively out there pitching your stories and talking about, everything that you have to talk about, and figuring out which where your audience is spending time and doing everything you can to get in front of them wherever that might be. So I love Peter and Source of Sources, and I say everybody should, reporters and PR people and small business owners, sign up for that. It's free, and you can actually, get some opportunities that way too.
Well, of course, the one thing we haven't talked about yet, and this is, since Haro has lots of people have a lot of feelings about Haro, but let's talk about something people have even more feelings about. Let's talk about the, what shall we call them? The contributor columns on various business publications, because this is something that just really, it started out as more of a, industry experts were being asked to write a column, and in exchange they were getting a bunch of eyeballs on their content for places like, the Amex small business
Mm-hmm.
site and things like that. And of course, there's some, pretty cool opportunities. I had a client that I did a lot of ghostwriting with who had a Fast Company column. And that was great because it was putting them in front of some of the people that they really did want to get in front of. And we even got some links back to the site because we had some really meaty content. And, that's pretty hard to do. But on the flip side of that, that same client had a not very up to date or modern PR firm at one point that kept talking about being able to get them in Forbes. But of
Oh,
course, you know where I'm headed with this, Michelle. But of course, the getting them in Forbes was, folks who somehow had finagled a Forbes contributor, byline, or paid the, $3,000 a year, whatever it is, and are now making a living off of selling people's, quotes or links or whatever into these things. And I still don't understand how Forbes doesn't crack down on it, because it's so, I mean, there are websites called things like, get it covered in Forbes.com. Like
mhm.
it's a whole industry around pay to play, air
Yeah.
quote, media. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, it's sad, okay? Like,
Yeah, it is.
and I mean, it's been around for so long, but I think it's gotten worse because, of course, my clients get these emails from these
Yep.
pay to play firms. I get them too, and so it's scary because I think now a lot of it, like there's one of them at least, maybe more, that's AI driven, and
Oh,
so
yes. Yes,
it's
there is.
just like, what are we doing? Like I was happy to see that Forbes got dinged by Google search.
Google.
So
Yeah.
that made me really happy because that couldn't have happened soon enough, in my opinion. And I don't
Overdue.
understand the whole craze. I know that Forbes used to carry clout and be a credible, media outlet, but I don't think it really is anymore. I know they had some actual real reporters writing stories. I don't know if they still do, but like all this pay to play stuff is just, to me, I mean, when I see somebody on Forbes Advisory Council, I'm like, oh,
Or in somebody say, "Oh, I've seen it in Forbes," or they're excited because they made "Oh, I made the Forbes list of whatever." It's like, you did not. You did not make the Forbes list. You made a list that a contributor who pays to be able to post on Forbes created in order to get PR firms that are,
mhm,
not really ethically inclined to pay
mhm,
money to you and not tell the client because they hadn't made their quota and they figured you'd be excited. And
yeah.
they were right.
Yeah, somebody made a payment is what that's
Yeah.
what happened.
Somebody
And
swiped.
that So, I mean, and again, I know when I can sound like, very negative about these things. However, I don't have anything against paid media. I just think that you need to disclose that it was paid. That's
Yeah.
all. That's all. I even encourage my clients in the B2B sector when we're doing trades, if they can afford to pay for anything, an ad, an advertorial, be it a
Award
trade show.
submission.
Yeah, something. I mean, just I think that the trades or any publication that's struggling, and most of them are, let's be honest, takes that as a good faith measure. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that you're paying for editorial coverage, but it stands to reason that they're probably going to think of you in a different light or think of you more often if you are also spending money with them on the paid side. And of course, again, you want to disclose if you're doing the paid thing, then just say, this is a sponsored piece or a paid opportunity or whatever, but just don't try to pass it off as earned. And wow, that's one thing that's a bar that I can't do it. Like
Ethics are important, and I had a client that had, kept being pitched by this pay for performance marketing agency. And of course, it was like, oh, and you don't pay until we place this article that we write for you. And of course, the article was not written by a human, it was written by AI. And if you're wondering what the tell was, no, it wasn't M dashes. I use lots of M dashes, thanks. It was that they quoted the CEO, and each time they quoted the CEO, they did the first time citation thing. And that's how you could tell that it was an
Oh,
AI, because the AI didn't understand that you don't do the full citation every time.
yes, like
So
Joe
that for me
Smith.
was the
Yeah.
tell. I mean, amongst other terrible writing cliches that it did, but that was like the obvious one. And then we even pointed it out to the person, and then they still would send drafts that did that. And it's like, so could you at least edit it after you write it with AI? It's terrible. Now, the holy grail for most of the most clients, though, most companies, they dream of whatever that one publication is, that is like that their mom reads or their dad reads, or some teacher said you're never gonna get to be in the pages of whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
There are those top tier media um, publications that frankly they get pitched all the time, but,
Mm-hmm.
it's unlikely that most people are going to be in the New York Times or on the Today Show or any of these things. So,
Mm-mm.
when you have somebody who's showing that, thirst for being in general interest media, what do you say to them? How do you get them to understand what kind of content it is actually going to get them that kind of coverage?
It's tough because to me, if they come in and lead with that, and I used to talk to more of those than I do now, I'll be honest, and I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe my picker is better than it used to be. I don't know, but um, I, I used to say yes, and then I knew, like I mean, like I knew it was probably not gonna work out,
Yeah.
because they don't wanna even give you, I would say that kind of thing is gonna take 3 to 6 months, maybe 12 months, maybe it will never happen. I'm like, we just don't know. So we have no
Yeah.
way of knowing when it's earned media. So I try to have that conversation with clients up front, and a lot of times if they lead with that, we try to talk, I'll talk to them about it. If they are just adamant about it, I usually just tell them, I'm not a good fit for that because I can't promise. And in good faith, again, I'm not going to just tell them stuff that they want to hear. I want to work with clients that I can actually deliver results and they see the results and they're happy. I'm happy. Everybody's happy and it works, well, and they want to work together over time. I think these one-off efforts or campaigns, you get the company that will call you 3 weeks before they're launching a product and they're desperate, I can't do those. I can't take those,
'Cause how on earth would you
projects.
have time to create unique pitches for, more than half a dozen outfits, if that, in that amount of time? And of course, what they're really wanting you to do is to just blast out the same pitch to everybody, which isn't going to get any coverage.
No. See, that's the thing that I come back to, and I was just thinking about this earlier today. If it worked, if bugging a reporter 9 times about the same piece of news worked, I mean, okay, I guess we'd all, maybe
Then we'd
we
all be
should all
doing
be
that.
doing it. Right, but it doesn't work. Sending out the same pitch to 3,000 reporters because you pulled a list out of a media database does not work. So just stop doing what doesn't work and do what does work, which is doing research, customization, getting a feel. It's not like you just like, it's kind of like relationships are, you don't just jump in, like you kind of got to warm up a little bit. You can't just, I don't know. I get really frustrated. And of course, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I get really really you know passionate about this topic, because I see it happen, and then it just, the more it happens, clients get, disgruntled, they get disillusioned, then they think PR doesn't work at all. And I'm like, well, I can where it does work, but it doesn't work maybe the way that you're used to, or the way they told you it would, or whatever. So
And anybody who's pitching you saying that they guarantee that you can go viral, they're selling you Forbes contributor links. All right. That's what they're selling you. They are not on the up and up, because you can't guarantee, you can't predict the future. You can't
no.
use a time machine to go back in time and orchestrate things to happen. So, all of this stuff takes a lot of time in relationship building, which also means being really responsive and having great stuff that if you want to be in that top tier media outlet, you need to be over time offering them things exclusively that they can't get anywhere else, that is catnip to their audience. And
Yeah.
most of us are not going to have that kind of content or that data point that is going to be so exciting for the top tier media. You just have to be ready when there is something really fun or interesting, but you can't promise people those top tiers. Those
No.
are the nice to have, and it's great. And frankly, most of the clients that I have that have gotten those kinds of placements, it's been over startup funding news.
Yeah.
That's primarily what people have gotten placed, and that's not something that you can wish into being. That takes a
Yeah.
lot of work.
Yeah. A lot of my clients have acquisitions these days, and so sometimes, we can do a little bit of different pitching with that, with the business press and so forth. I mean, it has to be a top tier outlet, get them interested. It has to be a really big deal. So
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that as much as I'm just talking about a little bit different coverage and business press and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest that most of the clients that I work with are not that they wouldn't mind being in the Wall Street Journal, but that's not their goal, because they know that's probably not where their audience is. So
Yeah.
they've thought through that, or we've talked about it, or they've done their own research or whatever, and they understand it might be more in the trade journal. It might be more following a certain influencer in the space or something like that. So, I mean, again, I don't know that the top tier press is the same as it used to be, that the cachet that it's had over the years. I'm kind of wondering if that's going to continue. And I think there are a lot of people who don't think so, but I'm not saying I wish that it would go away or anything like that. I'm just saying, I
But it's
think that,
different, because when we were
yeah.
all in an office together and somebody got, the Financial Times newspaper, someone else got the New
Mhm.
York Times, somebody got the Wall Street Journal, people would pass around those newspapers or flag things that were of interest in there, versus now, people are not passing things around that are links unless they're really, interesting. Plus, we're not sitting right next to somebody, so we're not having that casual, oh, I'm going to recycle this, but hey, you would actually probably really like this article. Like, some of that
Yeah.
stuff's just not happening. We're in a different world now.
Yeah, and there's paywalls. So, I
Mhm.
mean, that impacts, PR folks and clients in a big way, because, we can't just share an article. I mean, some of us have
Yeah.
memberships, we can gift the article, but I mean, it's really different. And I think, in these conversations about the AI driven search, that's why trade media might be a better fit, because they don't always have the paywalls. I mean, some of
Yep.
their stuff might be behind a paywall, but it's not like like the New York Times, you really, I mean, you're done. Like
Yeah.
you can't get anything there, like, unless you pay. So
Or go through your library.
yes, that would be true too. But how many people are going to do that?
Only the crafty former journalists are going to do that. So, when you get some really great coverage, what can you do from an own media standpoint to make more
Mhm,
out of it than just putting it in the, in the news section, which,
mhm,
that's great and all, but
mhm.
I feel like there's got to be more we can do, right?
Well, I mean, you should certainly share it on social and tag the journalist and the media outlet. And I always find that's funny that a lot of people don't seem to understand that that's important and why, because it's not about vanity for the reporter. It's about, the more people that see a story, read a story, the more likely that journalist is going to be to write another story about a similar topic. And maybe they'll call you for a quote or something because you shared the story and helped drive the visibility of that story. So I think it's just kind of common sense, but I know a lot of people don't always understand that. To your point about the media, the newsroom, the press area, a lot of companies don't even have that on their site, or if they do, it's buried. And that's very frustrating too, because if you are in PR, day and night like me, you really want your client to be like prominently featuring on their site all the information that a journalist would need to do a story. That means, your media coverage, but yes, your press releases, your backgrounders, your headshots, logos, other photography that might be helpful, a
And it's so much more
contact.
impactful to have it in its own section instead
Yes.
of, some folks will have like basically press content and press releases in their blog. And then I always think to myself, well, then who's ever going to go to your blog if we can't tell what's, a press release and what's third party media coverage and what's actually owned?
I wonder if somebody gave them advice not to have the press or news area on their site, because to me, it used to be around a lot more than it is now, because that's, of
Yeah,
course, I think that's if you're a journalist or anybody trying to get information about a company, a lot of times that's the first place you go. The other
yes.
thing that happens is the contact information, the media contact. That should be somebody who is on top of it. That means a phone number, an email, a way that somebody can get a hold of your company and get a response. And that's usually the same day or within, I'd say 24 hours tops, but you should really be monitoring that, because I've worked with clients even who have like some generic, like, press at abccompany.com. Oh, well, Joanne checks that and she's on vacation for 2 weeks. Well, okay, so
Like
Wired
that needs to
Magazine.
be a group email list. That needs to be an alias that pings everybody who's involved.
Yeah, Wired magazine ran a story once because we had that situation happen, and I'm like, well, you can put me up there if you want, or you can, like, send those over my way, or however you want to do that. But like, you need somebody who's on top of that, who's checking it and can get it to the right person. And you have to acknowledge to the reporter, if you're not ready to respond, that you're working on a response, so that if they're on deadline, they don't think you're just over there twiddling your thumbs, ignoring their message, that you're actually trying to get back to them with whatever they asked you for. So I kind of got off on a tangent, but
It was a good tangent. It's totally relevant. Um, Early in our conversation, though, I did allude to the fact that we had a shared client, and that client was Meltwater. And what I thought was fascinating and really honestly pretty ahead of its time is that they understood that their audience wasn't just PR pros, that it was also anybody who was in charge of, creating content, measuring content, doing social, because they white labeled Sprout Social as part of their overall services and package too. So they really were going all in on, anybody who had content and comms, integrating. And so as a result, you and I both created all sorts of bylined content, looking at things like how content and PR can collaborate. And I loved that because, of course, I frequently have had both of those kinds of roles at the same time when I was still in house.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think, you are somebody who, again, you are a content creator and a content person, but you also, your primary business is as a PR consultant. So how can people do a better job
Mhm.
of, upfront collaborating on content and making those decisions about whether you have something first be the owned media, or if you're going to pitch it first and then if it doesn't land somewhere, be owned? Like, how do you start building those relationships and kind of navigating that?
Well, a couple things. So that was really fun back when when we worked with Meltwater. I loved that, and I learned so much, and I'll always be grateful for that opportunity, because they were a fabulous client, and it was fun to to work with them and work with you and so forth.
And I
So
got to meet you for the first time at Content Marketing World,
I
having
know
dinner
I
with
was
your
so
Reeve.
nervous about that. um anyway, so there's two, I see, like, there's two camps. So a lot of times I work with companies that have a very small marketing team, like a one person marketing team, right? And so they're looking to outsource, and sometimes in that case the two are not talking to each other. So if they, for example, they outsource PR to me and they outsource content to an agency or somebody else,
Yeah.
they are kind of the go between there, and that doesn't always match up. And so that's an issue. There could be a lot of issues potentially, but I mean, I think what has to happen, even if it's a person marketing team or a bigger marketing team, you have to encourage them to work together. And
Yeah.
social also should be working in there, because I've been in that situation too. The client has a social media agency. I'm the PR person. They might let me sit in on the meeting, but is not thinking about what we're doing on the PR side at all. And I don't know if that's just because the client hasn't made that a priority, or that's just not how that agency operates. I think those three should be working together and collaborating very closely. And I talk about this all the time because I really think it's important, and I think it could solve a lot of problems if we got rid of the silos. I mean, there's all kinds of this in other areas of the business as well. Of course, silos are not unique to what we are doing, but I really feel like, just talking to each other. And then, of course, there are tools you could use. You could have spreadsheets, and you could have meetings, and you
Yep.
could collaborate where there's a pipeline, and sometimes maybe PR leads the effort if it is maybe an executive spokesperson. And sometimes maybe content leads the effort if it is a customer story, or like, however you'd work that out. But that doesn't mean that only the PR team can use that thought leadership piece, and only the content team can use the customer story. It shouldn't be that way, really. But I think it's just hard. They're just, I don't know.
And frankly, I mean, your executives only have so much time. So you should be doing a joint interview with your comms person and your content person, asking the questions they need, getting that synergy in place, so that way you know what all that content is that you're going to be creating around that idea. Because Jenny Dietrich, pace a model, and Jenny and her content mapping. You should never just be doing an interview to create one piece of content with that executive. It should be part of an ongoing conversation they're having, that ongoing thought leadership platform, which means you're going to be using that stuff, reusing it, and it's going to be different in different channels. And yeah. And I did have a bit of a flashback, Michelle, when you were talking about silos, because I was at one point, in an organization in the early days of social, where the PR team decided that they owned Twitter. Twitter was theirs.
Ooh.
And the person who decided that was not somebody who actually used Twitter, but they
Oh.
were, they were the owner, and they absolutely refused to ever run any of the content related social copy that we would write for various and sundry things. They refused, just wouldn't do it. And that to me was such a huge missed opportunity, because like, can you even imagine just being like, no, this channel is just ours, and we're not going to share any owned content? It blew my mind that was a real decision, that somebody was going to make. That was a hill they were ready to die on. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It just makes your job also not really rewarding, to have people who
No.
just don't want to play with you.
It's territoriality, right? I mean, and I don't understand that. I mean, I have experienced it, of course, but to me, it's a big problem if that's the case, because you're not doing your organization any good, and you should all really be working for the betterment of whatever, company or organization you're working with. I don't understand that mentality, but I know that it exists out there. The other thing I was just thinking about is how, now of course, we have podcasts, we have video podcasts, which vidcast or whatever you want to call it. So now to get more content, you could take, your video or your audio, get the transcript, publish that on your site. And of course, that's a piece of content. It helps you with search. You
Yep.
might be able to pull things out and use them for earned media, purposes too. So that just popped into my head. That's a little bit unrelated, but I was just thinking about that too.
Of course. I mean, we do that. We have, a recap that Alec does every time we have one of these fantastic chats. We publish the whole replay on YouTube. We'll use quotes and various and sundry things. I'm working on my first book, and let me tell you, I have a gold mine from all of the transcripts from doing content chat. So I'm going to be, mining that for great quotes and then reaching out to folks to see if they want to refresh them. There's just so much you can do when you're thinking more broadly than just, in your lane, in your container of that channel. Because a good idea shouldn't just be, owned by one person for one thing and then tossed away.
Yeah. And why not? And why not just be open and transparent and use it as much as you can, squeeze all the juice you can out of it, like I don't get it, but I know it exists out there, but please, people.
Plus, from a customer experience standpoint, can you imagine if, one whole aspect of your business is just completely missing from one of the channels that your customers are using to engage with you?
Yeah, because you want it to be consistent too, right? You don't want to maybe see exactly the same thing everywhere, but you want to have that sense, that flavor that it's coming all from the same,
Yeah.
songbook, I guess,
You don't
so.
want people to be completely shocked about some aspect about either like something new that you're doing as a company or a change that you're making because they just, didn't happen to be on the channel that you decided was the channel that you were going to use to talk about it. And that happens sometimes, and it doesn't make me want to be a loyal customer if that happens to me. I'm like, you guys are doing what? And why am I finding out about it this way?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Michelle, if you had
Mm-hmm.
one wish for anybody who is, picking up your book because they're thinking about, getting their feet wet and actually starting to do PR either for themselves or, for the business that they support, what
Mm-hmm.
would be your one wish for the thing that they spend, like that they do first, the one thing that they just do first?
That they do first
Mm-hmm.
is really think about what their goals are and think about where their audiences are. So that's two things. But and then a third thing would be just be consistent about it, because again, I've talked to companies and I worked with clients who did something one time and it didn't yield the results they expected. So therefore it didn't work. Well, don't shut
Maybe.
the door. Yeah, don't just, close off to that, because I feel like PR still gets kind of pushed to the side a lot. And I'm hoping that, again, with everything we're seeing with platforms like Perplexity, for example, and I know that, Christopher Penn and like we've had this conversation,
Yeah.
that it's going to be really important to be showing up everywhere. And again, he thinks you ought to invest your time and energy into more into your PR efforts. And I really hope that people are going to listen to that, because I think it can be really powerful if it's done right and people give it time.
And I love that you mentioned Perplexity because it is so fantastic, because when you ask it a question, it doesn't just spuriously cite some sources that may or may not exist. It actually shows you like those
Mm-hmm.
pages. It shows you
Mm-hmm.
the URLs. It shows you the image from the page. It shows you the copy that it used to make its inference. And if you are starting this kind of a journey and you want to, take that pulse to see, what are we known for, you can ask Perplexity, what is XYZ company known for? Or an individual, if you have somebody who says, oh, we don't really need PR because our executive team, they're already out there and they're, really established thought leaders, ask Perplexity, who they are and what are they known for. And, I always use myself as that example. I go, if you go and you ask it who I am and what I'm known for, it's accurate. And it has multiple different sources it points to.
Yeah.
And if you're not actually really getting out there and becoming a resource in your industry, the AI isn't going to just auto magically know who you are and what you do. That said, ChatGPT It does not know who I am. When I asked it to draw a picture of me, it drew a man.
Oh,
That was a bummer. It was a man and he was eating Cheetos. And, I have food allergies. Let me assure you, I don't just go willy-nilly running around eating Cheetos.
yikes. I
It was
haven't
pretty
done that
bad.
exercise, but I have looked myself up in Perplexity. So, yep, I would recommend people do that. I mean, again, it doesn't matter how big your company is, or, like you could do some fun research in there pretty easily. So, I definitely am using Perplexity more these days.
Love it. So, Michelle, where can people get your book and where can they get more from you on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, my website, michellegarrett.com, that's kind of the hub of everything, of course. But the book is available wherever you would buy a book. I would go to bookshop.org to buy it if it were me, maybe. But it is on Amazon. It wasn't a #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon. And that was the thing that everybody said, you've got to make sure that. So so that happened, but yeah, it's everywhere. And then I do a monthly newsletter that's coming out tomorrow. It comes out the second Tuesday of every month. It's free. You can sign up on my website. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Threads. And I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I have started my own little vidcast podcast, whatever you want to call it, called PR Explored. So that is available on YouTube, and I'm putting it on my site, and I'm going to do the transcripts and the whole thing. So,
Fantastic. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for having this little bit of a reunion with me and
Yeah.
sharing, giving everyone the scoop about your new book.
Thanks for having me so much. It was so fun, Erika. Thank you.
Thanks. And everyone else, you've got a few weeks off from me, but I will be back in the beginning of January with a whole new slate of content chat guests. And of course, if you'd like to be a guest or you know somebody that you think would be an amazing guest, drop me a line, let me know. And I can't wait to chat with them. And until next time, bye, everybody.